It was meant to be a simple, laid-back weekend get-together. A handful of friends, some music, easy chatter, drinks flowing, nothing out of the ordinary. I had actually been looking forward to it all week. It had been a rough month, and I hoped the evening would give both Sarah and me a chance to unwind. I'm Oliver. And my wife, well, most people would say she had a presence you couldn't ignore. She was the kind of person who stepped into a room and somehow made everything feel brighter. She laughed easily, carried herself with this effortless charm, and people gravitated toward her. For the first several years of our marriage, I enjoyed being in that orbit. We balanced each other in a way that felt rare, her boldness countering my quiet nature. I used to think it worked perfectly. Or maybe I just convinced myself that it did. The night started normally enough. Friends were laughing, drinks clinking, conversations drifting around the living room. I was by the snack table, refilling my cup and watching everyone mingle. Everything seemed relaxed and familiar. But then there was this tiny shift, something subtle, like the air tightening before a storm rolls in. It began with laughter. Sarah had drifted toward Ethan, my closest friend since college, and as they joked, I felt a small knot form in my chest. They'd always been playful with each other, and I tried to tell myself it was nothing. But the way she looked at him, head tilted, smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months, stirred an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. I forced my attention elsewhere, tried to engage with other people, tried to drown that little flicker of dread. And then it happened. Slow. Intentional. Impossible to misinterpret. Sarah leaned in and kissed Ethan. Not some quick, harmless gesture. A real kiss, undeniably intimate, right there in front of everyone. For a moment, my mind emptied completely, like the world had paused mid-breath. Conversations died. Music suddenly felt distant. Every pair of eyes landed on them, then on me. And in that suspended silence, something inside me settled. Years of quiet effort, patience, love stretched thin, and the widening distance between us, all of it came crashing into focus. I didn't yell. I didn't demand answers. I didn't throw anything or make a scene. Instead, I inhaled slowly, and a strange, calm clarity washed over me. This wasn't some slip or misunderstanding. This was a decision she had made. One I couldn't pretend away. My chest tightened, the sting of betrayal humming low and steady. I reached for my wedding ring, feeling the weight of everything it symbolized, the late-night talks, the shared routines, the compromises I made without thinking twice. All of that was wrapped up in that small circle of metal. And suddenly, I knew it no longer belonged to me in the same way. I set the ring down on the wooden table between them. A simple, quiet gesture, but it echoed louder than anything I could have said. The room went utterly still. Ethan froze, drink suspended in his hand. Sarah's face shifted from carefree amusement to shock, maybe even panic. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I turned and walked toward the front door. The soft click as it closed behind me felt like the final full stop at the end of a long sentence. The night air outside was cold and steady, unaffected by the chaos inside. As I walked down the driveway, something unexpected settled over me, a bitter, steady sort of peace. Not because I wanted to hurt them, not because I felt victorious, but because I had finally accepted a truth I'd been avoiding. Some fractures aren't repaired by talking things out. Some wounds don't need confrontation. They need space, honesty, and the strength to step away before you lose yourself entirely. When I reached the end of the driveway, I glanced back at the warm glow spilling from the windows. My heart still ached, not with fury, but with grief. Even so, there was a quiet resolve in knowing that I had protected the one thing I still had control over, my self-respect. For a few seconds, I just stood there, letting the night settle around me, feeling the strange stillness of a moment when everything changes and, somehow, finally becomes clear. The laughter drifted from somewhere in the distance, faint and unreal. And in that moment, I felt the smallest spark of a future where I no longer had to diminish myself for someone else's decisions. I didn't drive home. I couldn't. The idea of walking back into that house, past the noise and pretend normalcy, was more than I could bear. So I wandered instead quiet streets under a quiet sky, letting the night give me the space I needed. My phone buzzed every so often. Friends checking in, sending emojis, little messages of concern. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to explain or justify anything. I just needed room to think and breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. As I walked, memories flickered one after the other. Our honeymoon. Weekend escapes to Brighton, where we laughed until our ribs ached. Sarah's glowing excitement when we bought our first small home together. The way she traced her fingers along the counters, already imagining the years we'd spend there. I remembered the late-night talks about dreams, kids, and the future we both believed in. And then I remembered the unraveling, the dinners where her gaze drifted somewhere I couldn't reach, the touches that grew routine, the laughter that slowly stopped belonging to us. It was painful, yes, but it also brought a sharp clarity. I realized I had spent so long trying to hold together a marriage that had quietly fallen apart. I had bent, adjusted, and smoothed over every crack, thinking love alone could bridge the growing divide. But love, I learned, isn't always enough. People change. Sometimes the one you trusted chooses a direction that doesn't include you anymore. And sometimes the only way to keep your self-respect is to walk away. By the time I returned to my apartment, dawn was beginning to brush the sky with soft orange light. I poured a cup of coffee and sat out on the balcony, listening to the city wake. Cars, dogs, birds. Ordinary life felt strangely comforting. For the first time in ages, my mind wasn't looping through what Sarah was doing or who she was with. I wasn't afraid or analyzing or bracing myself. I simply existed, and for once, that was enough. Later that day, I talked to my closest friends, the ones who'd known both of us for years. I didn't go into detail about the kiss. I didn't seek advice on revenge or confrontation. I just said, I walked away, that's all. And they understood. Their support was calm, steady, and exactly what I didn't realize I'd been missing. No one urged me to fight or shout or cling to what was gone. They reminded me that some battles only drain you, and some endings come from choosing silence and distance rather than conflict. A week went by. The shock of what had happened made its rounds among our friends. I stayed out of the whispers, letting my quiet speak for itself. And unexpectedly, that silence held its own power. Sarah and Ethan both tried to reach me at first. Calls, texts, even messages through mutual friends. I ignored all of it. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I needed to protect myself from reopening a wound I was finally learning to let close. One evening, I saw them from across the street at a cafe. Sarah's hand rested on Ethan's arm, her laughter bright and familiar. My chest tightened briefly, but I let it pass. I didn't look again. I kept walking, feeling lighter with each step. It was a strange blend, relief mixed with sorrow, freedom tangled with loss. Leaving someone you once loved doesn't erase the love, but it lets you keep the dignity you need to move forward. And move forward I did. Slowly, carefully, but intentionally. I returned to routines I'd abandoned, morning runs, hobbies I'd neglected, late-night reading. I reconnected with friends in ways that weren't overshadowed by my marriage. Most importantly, I stopped shrinking myself to fit someone else's choices. The ring I'd left on the table no longer felt like a symbol of failure. It became a marker of understanding, that my worth wasn't dependent on their attention, and my peace didn't hinge on their approval. Months later, when people asked about that night, I still didn't mention Sarah or Ethan. I talked about what the experience taught me, that sometimes the bravest action isn't shouting or seeking vengeance, but quietly stepping away. Choosing dignity, accepting what is, without letting it define who you are. I don't know if Sarah ever grasped the weight of what she did. I don't know if Ethan ever understood his role in it all. And honestly, I stopped needing to know. Because when I left that house, set down my ring, and walked away, I reclaimed something they couldn't take from me, myself. For the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten, peace. Not loud or triumphant, but a steady, quiet certainty that I would never again compromise my sense of worth for anyone. And in that certainty, I found the freedom to rebuild, rediscover, and live on my own terms.